you can do something about how you are feeling and that there's nothing wrong with you. Even with diagnoses, I think we tend to identify with that a lot. And it doesn't, like when we're talking about generalized anxiety or certain symptoms of depression, it's not necessarily a lifelong thing. And there are things that we can do to change those symptoms and how we experience that.
This episode is brought to you by TherapyNotes, therapynotes.com, along with Barry's AI, berries.icu. A little over 15 years ago, when I started my private practice, I had to learn a lot, and most of it the hard way, and I don't think you need to do the same. Hi, I'm Gordon Brewer, a licensed psychotherapist, and welcome to the Practice of Therapy podcast, part of the Psychcraft network of podcasts. Join me in this journey of discovery as we have conversations with other leaders and professionals in both the mental and allied health fields. Join us as we explore both the business and clinical sides of running a private practice. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. This is episode number 365 of the Practice of Therapy podcast. I'm Gordon Brewer, and hope you're having a good January so far. It's hard to believe we're into a new year already, and I know I've been working hard to try to get myself better organized, which is an ongoing struggle for me personally. But anyway, I'm glad you're here, glad you're listening to us, and if you are this is your first time listening, welcome, and if you're coming back for more, glad you're here. And I hope either way you'll take time to follow us or subscribe to the podcast wherever you might be listening to it. My guest today is Jessica Patching Bunch, and Jessica and I have a great conversation just about the mind-body connection, which I think we all know about, but also just about how we create change in our lives and that sort of thing. And one of the things that I've always adhered to, and you'll hear us talk more about this, is that usually I think small changes lead to bigger results down the road. So I don't think you have to make any big, huge changes in your life or in your practice to create big changes down the road. And I really appreciate Jessica reaching out to me and just being vulnerable and talking about her own struggles and things that she's learned along the way, just as a practitioner and being in private practice. Before we get to that, though, one of the things that I wanted to let you know about, and if you're on my email list, you will have gotten some information about this, but the doors are open for the Practice of Therapy Collaborative, and it is a weekly mastermind group in which that I lead on Thursdays, and we are seeking more members for that mastermind group. It's a membership community, and if you'll just go over to practiceoftherapy.com/practice collaborative, you can find out more about that. As I mentioned, we meet once a week through the Circle platform, and it's a great group of people, and we've really gotten to know each other well and talk about our practices and the things that we struggle with, and also teach each other a lot of things. So the structure is basically we have a week of maybe me teaching something about private practice and different concepts. We also have hot seats in which somebody presents a problem, and we talk about ways in which they might approach that problem or ways they might work on that. Then we also have guest consultants that come in every so often. And then we also maintain contact with each other through the Circle platform and just maintain conversations along the way. But the main thing about it is that what I like about it is it helps us build some community. Private practice can be a lonely space. And so being able to have others that are like-minded and can be providing support, people that have been there before or people that are going through some of the same struggles we all know the value in just being able to have community to support us along the way. So I invite you to go over and check it out. And if you'll use the promo code, just winter25, you can get $15 off your monthly membership of the Practice Collaborative. So be sure and check it out, practiceoftherapy.com/practice collaborative. And also, before we get to my conversation with Jessica, I'd love for you to check out Mental Health Wear TN, mentalhealthweartn.com. It is an online store that specializes in selling T-shirts and sweatshirts and different swag items, all related to the mental health field, mental wellness fields, and also addiction recovery. There's also a lot of great products in there and designs that are geared specifically to our profession. So if you're looking for that perfect LCSW T-shirt, I bet you can find it there. And also my friend Ashley, who I've been helping her with the store, can do custom items. So if you've got a design in mind or want to add someone's name to it, you can do that. And if your order is more than $50, you can get free shipping on anything that you buy. So anyway, check it out, mentalhealthweartn.com. And also, real quickly, before we get to my conversation with Jessica, I'd love for you to hear from one of the members of the SiteCraft Network, along with our sponsors of the podcast, TherapyNotes, and also Barry's AI.
Hey there, I'm Aaron Potratz.
And I'm Nathan Hawkins. If you don't know us yet, we're the hosts of the Shrink Think podcast, which bridges the gap between therapists and clients.
The Shrink Think podcast is proudly part of the SiteCraft Podcast Network, focused on helping people live more meaningful and productive lives.
Join us every Wednesday in our engaging, informative conversations and lighthearted humor to help you normalize and demystify therapy for those beginning or continuing their mental health journey.
We discuss everything from understanding styles of therapy to addressing conflict with your counselor, learning about attachment styles, and the fear triangle. We seek to run the gamut of topics to pull back the curtain and empower effective therapy.
If you haven't listened yet, you can find us at shrinkthink.com/podcast and discover other resources, including educational videos and fun swag at our swag shop.
Hey, if you could save 10 hours a week and still have perfectly written clinical notes, would that catch your attention? If you don't know about it yet, I'd like to introduce you to Barry's AI. Barry's is a HIPAA-compliant AI scribe trusted by thousands of therapists. It writes your clinical notes in your unique style, generates detailed treatment plans, drafts client summary emails with key takeaways, and even creates prep summaries to help you start sessions with confidence. And it works well with any EHR like TherapyNotes and many others. It takes the stress out of note-taking so you can focus on what really matters. Whether you're working solo or part of a group practice, Barry's adapts to your needs and works seamlessly in any setting, in-person, telehealth, and even virtual sessions with headphones. It frees up your time to see more clients or simply do what you love. Getting started is easy. It only takes 30 seconds to create your first note. Ready to give it a try? Head over to berries.icu. That's berries.icu. And you can sign up for free and try it for 20 sessions. Plus, if you use the promo code just CRAFT50, that's CRAFT 50, you can get 50% off your first month. So give it a try. berries.icu.
Ready to upgrade your practice from a rusty bicycle to a shiny new sports car? Buckle up, because TherapyNotes is here to turbocharge your journey. It's the comprehensive practice management system you've been craving, equipped with everything you need to navigate patient records, schedule seamlessly, host remote sessions, craft detailed notes, and tackle insurance billing with ease. And guess what? It's your trusty sidekick, available whenever and wherever duty calls. Picture having more quality time with your clients, all thanks to this digital assistant that never clocks out. Here's the kicker. It's Gordon approved, so you can trust it's the real deal. Bid farewell to paperwork headaches and embrace a new era of efficiency and top-tier care. Ready to level up your private practice game? Swing by practiceoftherapy.com/therapynotes and punch in promo code GORDON for 2 months on the house. Enjoy the show.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome again to the podcast. And I'm happy for you to get to know today Jessica Patching Bunch. Welcome, Jessica. Glad you're with me.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Yes, and so one of the things that Jessica is passionate about, and I'm really looking forward to diving into this conversation, is just the mind-body connection and kind of her work around that. So, Jessica, as I start with everyone, tell folks a little bit more about yourself and how you've landed where you've landed.
Hi, yeah. So it's a long journey, and I always try to be succinct, but it is, started when I was younger. I had a lot of stress-related illnesses and issues that I would see doctors for, and they would tell me, this is just stress, and kind of leave it at that. Have less stress. And at that point, I didn't have the education that I do now, and I didn't understand that that was even possible. I thought, my life is stressful and this is terrible advice. I don't know how to do that. And I'd always been really interested in psychology and just kind of human behavior and why we do the things we do.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was my study in undergrad. And I kind of stumbled on a neuroscience class, and that kind of put me on that trajectory. I thought, this has so many answers that I'm looking for about the biological underpinnings for some of these, behaviors and things. And so that's the route I went. And I now work in neurodevelopmental research and have for some time. And learning about how the brain works, how the body works, how the nervous system works has been so useful for me personally in being able to identify the things that I can do to help manage and mitigate some of my stress and anxiety. And so that led me to want to share that information outside of academia to the general public, where a lot of these things are just not talked about.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also a lot of poor information out there. And I think understanding that there are biological reasons for a lot of the things that we're experiencing, that understanding how your brain and body work give you the agency to interact with your systems and focus on what you can do to, increase your overall just health and wellness.
Right. Yeah, it's been, for me, it's been interesting because I guess it was back during COVID. And it's funny how we mark that as a point in time, but back during COVID, I did a continued ed thing on somatic therapy. And, I'm old enough to where somatic therapy or somatic things wasn't really talked about much in my study, but yeah, just really understanding that brain body connection. And it really is amazing stuff when you can get people to understand that. So what sort of, I guess, for lack of a better way to ask it, what sort of techniques do you use, and kind of what's your way of going about things?
So I always start with breath work as a foundation, which I think getting people maybe comfortable with that, or there are a lot of skeptics, having people again understand the physiological response and how that is actually changing your responses in your body. I think that kind of education piece comes first, and then working with different styles of breath work. Functional breath work being kind of a baseline and helping people understand that how we breathe is how is a measure of our stress. It's indicating stress. It's also input into that stress response. And so having slow controlled breaths throughout the day, throughout our lives, helps us to have some balance in our nervous system. Because when we are, over breathing, hyperventilating, we have those short breaths, we're sending those signals to our sympathetic system to activate, which then increases heart rate, and all of that causes all kinds of problems. So that, as kind of preventative as long term, and then also acute kind of immediate interventions with like physiological sigh and things like that people can do immediately when they need some relief.
Mm.
So that is my big one, because it is just so much information for us and information that we can send to our system. And I think it's really the most accessible. Also, some kind of somatic movements to activate vagus nerve and work on vagal tone. Very basic movements, just very slow, mindful stretching, and encouraging more movement throughout the day, because we know, we have a very sedentary lifestyle here, especially in the States, and that creates a lot of depressive symptoms. And so just things like going for a walk. People think of, I think, movement a lot of the time. I have to go exercise. I have to do something specific. And it's not. Just moving our bodies creates a physiological response that enhances our mood and our cognitive function and overall brain health, which then, if our brain is not functioning right, our mental health cannot follow. So
Mm-hmm.
I think those are my big three.
Yeah, yeah. There's a story that really kind of sold me. Maybe that's not a good word, but I had a client, a former client several years ago, and this particular client was waking up in the middle of the night with panic attacks, and they just couldn't figure out why and just kind of this constant state of anxiety all the time. And eventually she got to the right doctors, and they discovered that she was suffering from gallstones, and they missed it somewhere along the way. But it was like her body was going into this fight or flight kind of thing, even in the middle of the night, just because of that. And when she had all that corrected and the surgery, it just changed everything for her. And so, yeah, so I think there definitely is that, our body's a whole thing. And I think we've been misled, I think maybe in the past, that it's just all in your head. But there are things that happen. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that science and medicine are ever evolving. And we have had this idea. There was for a long time the idea that your brain and body were very separate, and kind of what was happening in your head didn't really matter. It was kind of, like you said, it's all in your head,
Mm-hmm.
which a lot of the time it is, because our interpretation of things, our neurochemical makeup is sending information to the rest of our systems. And so it is, but not in the way that we have been led to believe, not in a dismissive way.
Mm-hmm.
And with the gallstones, exactly, all of our systems work together. And we have kind of also been taught, I think, through medical specialization, which is fantastic, but we've been taught that all of our kind of pieces are separate. And that's just not the case. All of our systems are always communicating with each other. And, a large part of our mood balancing neurochemicals live in our gut. And so all of that, along with our vagus nerve, which is the cranial nerve that is kind of sending information back and forth to the body, 80% of that information is going from your body to your brain about your state of being, what is needed. And so I think those two things alone are enough for me to say, okay, there's something in there.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So what were the things that really kind of got you on this path of, I mean, with your own story, I mean, what were the things that really kind of helped you say, okay, this is solid stuff?
When I started working in research, I I was really having a hard time struggling with my own stress and anxiety, in addition to to what had always kind of been there.
Mhm.
And I really started looking into the stress response and what that cycle looked like and what that, the physiology involved. And, that led into kind of how our internal environment affects the physiology and really creates those responses. We think about stress a lot of the time as the external things, money, worries, traffic, other people. And so much of it is internally derived. And so I really started focusing on that and, working on my own therapy to address some of the things like my inner critic and my, anxiety and worries about things and, past traumas and things. Again, because those are the things that we can control. And so the more I learned about the stress response and what influences that, like breath and movement, and more about the vagus nerve and how your brain interacts with
Mhm.
all of those things, I just kind of I fell in love and just kept going down that rabbit hole. And it just made so much sense to me that I just kept digging away at that.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. What with your own kind of self-care, I guess, what are you finding is are kind of the non-negotiables that you have to do now? Because I know for me, being outdoors in some form or fashion every day is really important for me. And weather permitting, I do a lot of walking. I'm fortunate to live close to a green belt that goes along a stream. And so being able to walk and see all the ducks and the discovered otters the other day. So that was really cool. River otters. So, I mean, yeah. So what sort of things do you find? Because I think one of the things that happens for us, particularly in the mental health fields and as therapists, is that we're really good at telling other people what to do, but we don't do it ourselves.
Yes, absolutely. And I do notice when I'm like, oh, I'm feeling really overwhelmed, or I'm starting to see a lot of anxious symptoms, and I have to reflect, say, oh, I have not been doing these things that I
Mhm.
know I need to be doing. And um, very similar. My non-negotiables are movement every day, and that looks different depending on. I live in the Pacific Northwest, and it is beautiful. And when I can be outside in nature, I absolutely do. But it rains a lot here, and so sometimes I don't want to go out there in that. So it will look like more, indoor movement, whether that's going to the gym and just walking on the treadmill. Walking is a fantastic one that for every day because of the movement, but also kind of the bilateral stimulation
Mhm.
and eye movement that happens. So walking and then sitting in silence first thing in the morning with my breath and practicing some kind of balanced breathing because we don't get a lot of silence in our day
Mhm.
and we are overstimulated all of the time. So giving myself that in the morning to prep into the day where I'm not immediately stimulated and
Mhm.
going into all of the stressors of my day. So movement and my morning breath. And I think those are the two big ones that I make sure that I have every single day.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you see as the most important things you would want people to know? Maybe not necessarily in the therapy world, but just in helping people in general. What is kind of your mantra now?
That you can do something about how you are feeling and that there's nothing wrong with you. Even with diagnoses, I think we tend to identify with that a lot. And it doesn't, like when we're talking about generalized anxiety or certain symptoms of depression, it's not necessarily a lifelong thing. And there are things that we can do to change those symptoms and how we experience that.
Mm.
And I think I would be remiss if I didn't, acknowledge. I think there's a lot of focus on individual things of what we can be doing, and a focus on individual responsibility, which absolutely is a huge part of it. But our environment also dictates a lot of that. Our access to nutritious foods and things that just contribute to our overall well-being. And so there are a lot of external stressors. There's a lot going on in the world. And so focusing on what we can do, what we can be doing for ourselves, we're not helpless. And the things that we do affect our physiology, our neurobiology, and how that works. And so, long answer, we have agency. We can do things in our days to adjust how we're feeling.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I think is, in just my work over the years with individuals and couples and that sort of thing is I love that word agency of being able to recognize that, okay, there are things that you can change. And I think one of the mistakes I think a lot of us as humans make is that we wait for change to come to us rather than creating change in our lives, across any of our life domains. I mean, it's just, yeah. I think waiting for my ship to come in, so to speak, is I think a mindset change that's important to communicate to people.
Absolutely. And, as you're saying that, another thing that kind of popped into my head is I think when we're trying to implement some of these new practices or habits, we think about, kind of the go big or go home message of you have to jump right in and do all of that, which isn't necessarily always great for your nervous system because a lot of change can be shocking to your nervous system. And then that's doing the opposite of what we want. Also, when we're thinking about creating new physiological patterns in the brain and body, it is repeating that over and over and over again in small amounts. Like I think about we can, brush our teeth for an hour once a week. And that is not going to be as beneficial as that 2 minutes a day. Yeah. And so it's about really just making it accessible for ourselves. It doesn't have to, these things that we can do don't need to be another overwhelming thing in our day. 2 minutes at a time, 5 minutes at a time is worth it. It does matter. It does make a difference.
Yeah. I've always been adhered to an idea of, we don't necessarily need to have huge changes in our life. And I think like brushing your teeth, I think change occurs at the level of our daily routine in that we have to do something different for things to change. And I know in just working with clients, just being able to kind of share with them my theory of change, which is, if you think about an airline pilot flying from point A to point B, they have to maintain a certain heading. But if they change that heading just by 1 degree, it puts them in a totally different place than if they kept on that same course. So I think just small 1 degree changes is all we really need in our life to make huge changes down the road.
Yeah, I really like that analogy. That's that's great. And it is.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it can be frustrating to not see the changes that we want immediately and might think, this isn't working because, we don't necessarily see that immediately. It takes time to build up. And then I think over time we can look back and say, oh, this is a major shift that I can see. It does take time.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. And that's, again, going back to what you said earlier, we have a culture of instant gratification and instant change. But I think being able to get into that mindset of change occurs gradually and we just make little tweaks along the way that create that change. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Jessica, I've got to be respectful of your time. And what sort of parting thoughts do you have? And also tell folks a little bit about your practice and how they can get a hold of you if they want to have a conversation.
Parting thoughts. I always am like, what profound thought do I have to finish?
Yeah. It doesn't have to be a big one. It could be a little one.
like we have just talked about.
Yeah.
I think if I have any kind of parting thoughts, it is again just to reiterate that some of these symptoms and feelings and things that are going on doesn't mean that something's wrong. It's just a part of being human, experiencing all of these different things and how we interact with that and the things that we do to respond to that makes all of the difference. And there are things that we can do for ourselves. And it doesn't have to be complicated to work.
Right.
And I'll leave it at that.
Yeah,
I could go on, but I will leave it at that.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
Just to get a hold of me, I do a lot of free content on Instagram. I have also my own podcast, Brain Body Resilience.
Okay.
And then I do have a website, which is www.brainbodyresilience.com. And that's where folks can find me for kind of, staff trainings and more along those lines, as well as personal meetings. So those are probably the best ways to find me.
Okay, awesome. And we'll have links in the show notes and the show summary about that. I'm looking forward to listening to your podcast. And I'm so glad you joined me on this podcast. And hopefully we'll be able to have another conversation here soon. Well, thanks again to Jessica for joining me on the podcast. And hopefully you found this conversation helpful. I know it's always just one of the things I love about doing a podcast like mine is the fact that I get to have just great conversations with some really smart and intelligent and wonderful people. And so again, big thanks to Jessica for being on the podcast. And be sure and check out her podcast, Brain Body Resilience. And you can find it wherever you listen to your podcast, just like this one. And so be sure and check it out. And you can also find links here in our show notes and show summary to go and check out the things that Jessica has. And also big thanks to our sponsor of the podcast, TherapyNotes. They are the leading electronic health record system for mental health providers. They're who I use in my practice. And you can find out more about them by going to practiceoftherapy.com/therapynotes. Oh, and be sure and use that promo code, just Gordon, Gordon, and you can try them out for 2 months for free to see how you like them. I think you're going to like them, so be sure to check them out. And also, if you're interested in joining the next or the ongoing Practice of Therapy Collaborative, the doors are open now for you to join. They will be open until February 14th. And also, if you will join now, you can take advantage of the coupon code WINTER25 and get $15 off your membership in that mastermind group. So be sure and check it out. And also, thanks again to Berries AI, berries.icu. They are a company that provides help with progress notes and that sort of thing using artificial intelligence. And I think all of us are hearing more and more about that. But what I love about their platform is the fact that they integrate with so many other platforms like TherapyNotes. So be sure and check them out, berries.icu. And again, thanks to you for joining me on the podcast or listening to the podcast. Do take time to follow us or subscribe to the podcast wherever you might be listening to it. And also looking forward to being with you again next week for another episode of the Practice of Therapy podcast. You've been listening to the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer, part of the PsychCraft network of podcasts. You can find out more about the other great podcasts in the network by visiting psychcraftnetwork.com. And if you haven't done so already, please visit us at practiceoftherapy.com and get your free private practice startup guide, along with a lot of other great resources and webinars and free things just by visiting. Also, be sure to follow us wherever you might be listening to your podcasts. This podcast is intended to be educational in purpose and is not intended to give legal, accounting, or counseling advice. If you need a professional, find the right person for that.